Hello and welcome to the Pinkbike podcast. I'm Mike Kasmer, and today I'm joined by Brian Park, Stefan Pelletier, and Steve Frothingham. And Steve works for Bicycle Retailer, our sister publication. He's going to join us when we're doing some exciting tariff talk, because tariffs have been, they're very exciting, and we all have questions, and Steve has more answers than most of us do. So we're going to kind of get into it, try to explain what's happening, what we know, and what we don't know, and actually what that might mean for the price of bikes and the bike industry as a whole.
We should probably start with the fact that there is so much we don't know, and none of us, although we're, I guess, industry experts, we are very much not tariff and manufacturing experts. So,
exactly. Yes, I'm not pretending to be any economist or, I know how to read and I can process some information, but
and to be clear, like by the time this podcast gets uploaded and posted, like 4 more things are going to have happened. So we apologize in advance for not being up to date. But yeah, we've spent, I don't know about you folks, but I've spent the weekend talking to a lot of bike people and friends across the industry. And there's a wild array of people's perspectives and comments and stuff.
Is that what that's your weekend fun stuff, is tariff talk?
Just for Stefan. Little group chat.
I would try to avoid it on my weekend, but yeah, there's a lot of that going on for sure.
Yeah. I guess we could just have Steve, do you want to do a little quick primer for people that are tuning in? Just kind of like bring us up to speed of basically what tariffs could potentially mean for people. I mean, mainly in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, there were already quite a few tariffs in place, but they were mostly on China. U.S. tariffs, yeah. And so the industry had been, evacuating out of China for years, really, but especially since Trump took office. And then I think it was a surprise when he came out last week and announced all these tariffs on everywhere else, and in particular, some of the bike manufacturing countries like Taiwan, Cambodia, Vietnam were hit with some of the highest tariffs last Wednesday. Or Tuesday. Vietnam, 47% on regular bikes, 47% on e-bikes, 57% on regular bikes out of Vietnam, which is where we're getting a lot of bikes these days.
Yeah. So for people listening, the high-end bike world, for background, there was a lot of high-end bike manufacturing in China over the past decade or so. Steve, you're gonna have to tell me when it started, but tariffs have come into place, and people have moved their manufacturer. They've tariff hopped, and sometimes it's even like a Taiwanese company that was manufacturing in China or had a plant in China. They've now moved that to Cambodia or Vietnam, and to try and get around these tariffs.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, they actually are still Chinese companies. That just opened up another factory in Vietnam or Cambodia or Malaysia.
And that's one of the justifications for this shotgun approach, I think, of these tariffs has been to try to stop as much of the tariff hopping as possible.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to try to suss out motivations from the administration. I think that's not a winning,
fruitful endeavor. Yeah,
not a fruitful endeavor. So let's just not even go to the motivations. But that's been the effect, and the tariffs that were imposed in the first Trump administration were relatively small, and there were a lot of exclusions granted. And a lot of the bike products in particular got exclusions, and so it became no big deal. And it just encouraged companies to move out of China and set up in Cambodia, Malaysia, Vietnam. But this time there's nowhere to run. There's not a lot of options left.
I guess one question that I think a lot of people will have is, we see these numbers tossed around 50%, 90%, 110% tariffs. What does that mean for the bikes that we'd be purchasing? I want to buy a bike from a company. How much are you anticipating bike prices to increase? And can you explain a little bit about why they're probably not going to increase 110% right away?
Yeah, they're not going to increase 110%. You know, I always just go back to the rule of three, 1 to 3, which is just that a dollar increase in the value at port ends up being about a $3 increase on the sales floor. So that's not a percentage increase, it's a ratio. So if you think
That's a
about,
lot.
yeah, because there's markup along the way, but it's actually less than if it were percent, because the percentage doesn't carry through.
Right.
Well, this
So
percentage doesn't.
$1,000. So a $1,000 bike at port valued $1,000 would normally be close to a $3,000 bike at retail, right?
Okay.
Take that $1,000 at the port and you add a 50% tariff on top of it. That's $500. So then it's a question of how does that $500 get carried through? Does it take the bike that was $3,000 and turn it into a $3,500 increase, which is, somebody do the math. I don't know what that is, but it's not a 50% increase, right? It's like a 15% or 17% or something like that. So if you see what I mean, the dollars pass through and there's opportunities there for people to squeeze their margins along the way. But the percentage doesn't pass through.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, most
somewhere
people aren't
less. maybe
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, it's
half.
less.
So if it's a 50% tariff, maybe the retail price increase is 25%. It's something like that.
I think
depending on variables.
you're
Many
going
variables.
to see a lot. Bikes are a worse case scenario than other consumer products, in that there's less margin on a lot of bikes than there is on, say, like pedals at the bike shop. If you go down to the bike shop and buy new pedals, the bike shop, that's a keystone product normally. So that the bike shop is making somewhere in the 100% profit range. It's not quite that high in a lot of cases these days, but they're, you know, if you buy $50 pedals, they might be making 15 to $20 on that. That's there's a lot more margin there than percentage wise than if they make than like a bicycle for the bike shop. Not total dollars, but in percentage. So to maintain their profit level on those pedals, people can eat the percentage change more. The shop or the manufacturer or the distributor, etc. Like the price doesn't need to change quite as much than the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in most cases, like the thing that I think people get confused, in most cases they won't carry the amount of the tariff on. They're not going to like double. If you got hit with a $500 tariff, they're not typically going to double that for the consumer and try to like profit off a tariff because they're already trying to keep sort of reasonable.
Do you guys think like brands that you're talking to, whatever, do you think they're going to try to eat up some of these tariffs for the initial bit, or are these going to get passed on pretty quickly to consumers? Like, what's kind of the word on the street, Steve?
All of the above. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is a lot of people just canceling orders. I mean, almost literally running down to the docks and saying, stop, turn around, do not come into port unless you can get here before midnight Wednesday. So there's some of that, and that makes me wonder whether we're going to have a shortage, if it's going to go back to like, 2020, 2021 scarcity situation.
So, ironically, the situation like 2 weeks ago was that there were a lot of bike brands that had overstock, that had too much, and they're worried about having to clear that out. They're worried about like, oh, this albatross around our neck of 2024 product that we haven't cleared out yet. Oh no, this is terrible. And some of them are under like real financial pressure. So is that con now a pro for them? They have inventory, a pre-tariff inventory, in-house, warehoused, and ready to go at 2024 prices.
Yeah, I think it is. I think I talked to one bike guy the other day who said he was very happy that he did not take the opportunity to liquidate a lot of his inventory a month or so ago. That inventory is suddenly worth a lot more money. I think the used bikes are going to become worth a lot more money. Good news for the pros closet if they want to get back rolling again.
Yeah, and then you also have the companies that have bike launches coming up. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the timing actually is pretty wild for the industry because this is Sea Otter Week. As we know, there's a ton of product introductions. The industry's gotten better over the last few years about having at least some of the products available when they launch at Sea Otter instead of doing vaporware at Sea Otter, which means that at least some of those brands had stuff in hand before this week. So that's good. Then again, there's some other brands that had
So if you're
stuff.
going to buy a bike, do it like buy like an old bike now.
Yeah. But there's, as we know, there's a lot of companies that had stuff, on the water time to maybe arrive this week, next week, right after Sea Otter. Not that everything revolves around Sea Otter, but it's the kickoff of the season. So there's a lot of inventory, I think, floating around in the Pacific. That
inventory gyre.
a lot of it's going to get turned around. I mean, I had a story the other day about a pretty small company, Turn. They make e-cargo bikes, and he told me on Saturday that if the bikes that he had on order right now and expected to get in the next couple of weeks, if they all arrived, he would have to come up with $1 million cash to get them into the country, and that's a small company, maybe medium. You can imagine, if that was specialized or Trek, multiply times 10, 20. So he literally is just stop, turn, he got on the phone to the factory and, stop sending stuff. And he's making sure that nothing arrives in port after midnight Wednesday or midnight Tuesday.
Because I mean, that's how it works. If you don't know about the tariffs until they arrive, so you might have expected a certain cost of X dollars, but then your stuff's been on the water for a couple of weeks and then you end up paying more, or they already factor that in?
It's, well, I mean, he was expecting to pay zero because e-bikes coming out of Vietnam, the tariff was zero. And now all of a sudden it's 47%. And it's not something that, the Uncle Sam doesn't offer terms. They don't have a, pay-as-you-go plan. So there's like, here's the bill. Give us $1 million or your bike's not getting out of port. Mm-hmm. So how's that for your cash flow?
Right. Where do those things go if you don't come up with the money at port? Like, do they just push it into the Pacific garbage patch or like in the ocean or like what happens?
Costco? I don't know.
If you've got a big boat, you should go out and get ready for a bunch of bikes getting sent back.
Bunch of containers bobbing
and pirate action going.
Yeah, we can get like the Pinkbike trawler, and we can start a real online deals thing where we just go out and like actual fish the containers.
Real online deals where you reel them in.
There you go.
There you go.
Stefan, you worked for Forbidden Bicycles.
Oh, you're gonna go there?
Yeah, absolutely, I am. Well, and
right.
What time? When do we launch this podcast? Wednesday? Thursday? Okay, nice. So he'll have launched. Forbidden will have launched a bike Thursday.
Yep, that
maths. Yeah, so we can talk about it. We should call Owen at some point and find out. But do you know if he's okay? Like, will he have? That's a very hot bike. It's a very cool bike.
It's been a few months of not being that involved, but I've heard it's been definitely quite a challenge to get that bike like out in time for this launch, and then all the tariff stuff thrown on top has made it extra interesting. I'm pretty sure just with I don't know if I shouldn't probably say too much because I don't know what I should and shouldn't say, but there was something with like assembling the e-bikes in Asia was easier than because the other bikes were assembled in Cumberland, in Canada here, and I know they've switched for at least the e-bikes, but then this happened, so I know that threw a whole other wrench in the bike launch shenanigans. Is Owen okay? I don't know. I think he's okay.
He's one of my favorite people in the industry. Owen, I hope you're not listening. I hope you're doing cool stuff right now, launching your bike. But
he's great. But I think it's been. I feel like for any brand across the entire industry, the past couple months and maybe year has been like, I don't think anyone's been super thriving. And then this on top, I guess that was a question I had for at some point is, are we doomed?
As an industry? Well, Steve might and Kaz are going to be shocked to hear this, but there are other countries other than America in the world. And I spoke to a brand this morning who was telling me like, hey, yeah, I mean, it's not great. The USA market is a big deal, but it's not our biggest market. And so we might feel a little bit of pain, but in some ways, this is going to be much harder on like some of the USA centric brands, the Specialized and Trek brands that where they're like, that's so critical to their business. And you know, we sell in a different market and that's our biggest market. And I feel like we can, or they feel like they can actually gain overall market share against some of the American companies in the short to midterm.
Yeah, actually, we asked today. We put a little thing up to ask people if they had questions about tariffs, and one of the questions was from someone in South America asking if this would mean that companies would start focusing more on South America, because if you have the U.S. out of the equation, it would make sense. I was speaking with a smaller e-bike manufacturer, and they were saying, yeah, we might just kind of try to divert. They've got a new e-bike coming, but now they're like, well, U.S. might not be the market where we try to push, and we might try to push somewhere else, whether it's Canada or Europe or somewhere, and just avoid the hassle for now.
Yeah. And, I mean, Trek and Specialized do a lot of business outside the U.S. as well. And, I've talked to people at those companies that said they're looking for opportunities outside the U.S., and maybe for the next few years, that's where they see more opportunities. That doesn't help them come up with that cash that they need to get the stuff through port this week when it shows up.
Yeah. Steve, do you think, we saw a big exodus of bike brands either like going out of business or filing for whatever like Rocky did or just exiting the US market. Do you think this could be like a nail in the coffin for a lot of brands that have been struggling financially?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think some of those companies can just retreat from the US. I mean, look at Yamaha, they just pulled out of the US e-bike market, but they're still doing Europe and Asia and Japan. In fact, they just bought Bros, right? So they're investing in e-bike everywhere except for the US. Stromer also pulled out of the US. There's a few other European brands that probably will, especially on e-bikes. I mean, the market for e-bikes is so much bigger in Europe than in the US that it's pretty easy for those brands to just say, the heck with it, let's just focus on Europe.
Steve, I know we were chatting, I don't know, I feel like a couple months ago about how we were surprised that I think it was around the Rocky Mountain and GT issues, and both of us were surprised. And I'd say I still am surprised that more brands haven't hit like totally fallen apart, given a tough couple of years and just how little money is available in the market.
Yeah, I mean, most brands don't send out a press release when they shut down. They just sort of quietly fade away, or they don't even take their website down. They're just zombie sites.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, are they still in business? I don't know. Their website's still up, but is anyone at home? There's a lot of those out there.
Yeah,
And I think even this from my perspective, the tariffs and those like the smaller US companies, smaller to mid-size that were kind of hoping on having their big product launch in June that's going to be the next one that gets them over the hump. That's where it's going to be the challenge. Like if they do, they're kind of like a lot riding on their next bike that comes out is going to put them back on the map because they've been kind of like ghost companies or dormant for the last few years. This could really, like you were saying, a nail in the coffin. It'd be so hard they don't have the funds to make money off of the bike they're hoping to sell this summer.
Yeah, and I think reality was setting in early this year about, even before this, announcement last week, that, there's still a lot of inventory in the channel. 2025 is not going to be the bounce back year that we were hoping for. Brian and I were at that BLC meeting, and I think reality was setting in on people. A year ago, they were saying, make it through 24, make it to 25, whatever that phrase was.
Yeah, we survived to 25. We
survived to 25, and now it's like, oh, shit, it's 25. But
I feel like that carrot's been dangled for years now. It's just been one more year,
I gotta
guys.
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we have a story. we have a story today about Wrench Science, and they decided to pull the plug in late 24 because they saw the writing on the wall that there's still a ton of inventory in the channel, and the custom bikes that Wrench Science sells can't compete with when every major brand is.
But maybe now they can.
out.
That's almost backwards, because now if you have inventory at pre-tariff prices, and the it's been really, this tariff thing has been challenging for me, because like at my core I'm not like anti-tariff. I don't love how they were applied here, but I also see value in protecting domestic manufacturing. I don't know. We hold self-evident that like domestic manufacturing is good because they're higher quality, they have less environmental impact, and they have a higher standard of worker conditions. But like, not all three of those things are necessarily true. But I do think it's true that most of the people listening to this podcast want better stuff not made by slaves, and want to not destroy the earth more than necessary to support our little hobby of riding expensive kids' toys in the woods,
Yeah, but they also wish that those kids' toys weren't expensive, and that's where it's tricky. Like, if you're trying to, and plus just having the manufacturing infrastructure in place, that's the thing. With tariffs could make sense, but if there's no way to make things at the scale that you're currently doing with like a high-end carbon fiber bike, make that in the U.S. at the scale that Merida or anything, a giant factory is doing. There's nothing exists at the moment. You can't just like be like, hey, factory, start making me bikes and I need them by next week.
Right. There's a lot of stick right now and no carrot. It would be nice if it were a little bit more strategic and there were carrot and stick. But I'll also say that like I understand why as an industry we do tariff hop, but I also understand why the administration would like people to not tariff hop from country to country.
You're getting into motivations again, Brian.
I know. We said we wouldn't do this. I said,
for everyone listening, the tariffs are all Brian's idea. He created them. And
yes.
Mr. Tariff himself.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is sounding pretty doom and gloom. Is anyone like poised to do maybe well in this situation and like thrive, or are we all screwed?
Chris King?
Well, it does increase it. Yeah, it does increase the value of that inventory that's been hanging over the industry for 3 years. It increases the value of used bikes as well.
Does it help some of the domestic brands?
It could.
Sorry, Steve. Does it help some of the domestic brands like an i9 or a Allied or somebody like that?
I don't know about Allied, but
right, because they've an Allied is a weird one because they've just announced that they're moving their product.
I don't know if they've announced that yet.
They have. It's public on their site now.
On the Able? I mean, the BC40 that's been public since that came out, or the update. Where were we? Yeah, I mean, they're going to have troubles too, because even, in Industry 9, I think they import some rims. They obviously, their aluminum costs are going to go up if they haven't already. And here's something we haven't even touched on at all, which is, are we going into a recession? What's going to happen to consumer spending? We're going to have high inflation and high unemployment. Is anybody going to be buying anything?
This is officially the scariest Pinkbike podcast of all time.
That's the really scary thing. And then, hey, well, let me throw another thing out, though, is that some people in the bike industry say recessions aren't that bad for the bike industry, because people buy bikes for transportation. And even as a luxury item, a bike is a lot cheaper than a sailboat, and a week in Moab is a lot cheaper than a week in wherever rich people go.
I hope someday I'm cross-shopping mountain bikes and sailboats.
Right.
You don't
One
do
more
that,
year,
Kaz?
dude. Once we get past this year, you're going to be good. It's all going to go back.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
One more year.
I mean, a new Ibis doesn't even cover like what it costs to keep your sailboat in the marina for a year.
No.
So,
yeah.
Okay, but Ibis, they have that little like XC domestic manufacturing lab experiment. Is that, I guess, has anyone spoken to Ibis, or like, is that something that they'll probably try to expand on, since they sort of have a bit of that infrastructure going and a bit of that skilled labor?
Yeah, I mean, so it would be interesting to talk to them. As far as I know, they were just making the size smalls there, right? Wasn't it just the
it's pretty limited. Pretty limited.
Yeah, or maybe it was
all the carbon fiber is imported from Japan.
Yeah.
So that's going to go
And-
up 20%
and I
or
know that-
something.
And I know that our marketing contact at Ibis is no longer there either. So, yeah. Don't know.
Questions.
So we don't know anything, is
Well-
what we're telling the Pinkbike
Yes,
listeners.
well, we know some
and
things,
we're
but yeah,
we're scared.
we're trying to learn, but we have
I mean, it's what it says on the tin, man.
Well, you know, cars are going to get 25% more expensive. Avocados are going to get 50% more expensive. Bikes might start to look like a good deal. Might be good.
I like it, Steve.
there's some optimism. We need at least a little bit of optimism in this podcast today.
I know, I'm trying to bring in like some
Yeah.
hope, but
Well, I hope that Owen from Forbidden got all of his stuff landed for the North American market before things got super dicey, and that he has a very cool bike, and there's going
it's
to be a
really
lot of
cool
demand,
bike.
for it, and yeah,
Somebody probably brought their stuff in exactly at the right moment with the
Mhm.
right new fork on it and the right new drivetrain and the nice new rims, and they got it in right before it hit, and they're sitting pretty.
I think that's something some listeners might be curious about, is because Steve, you mentioned the prices could go up on like these older bikes that got in before the tariffs were in place. So is like I don't know if people are still getting like old GX drivetrain bikes. I feel like some brands were holding on to like crazy old stock. But are those going to go up, or are those still going to remain kind of discounted like they have been?
You know, if I was sitting on a bunch of bikes right now, I would not be marking them down anymore.
that
I
has
mean,
started to happen.
At the very least, I would be saying like, "Hey, how soon can we turn off this promotion we're running?" I don't know. I wouldn't continue it after last Wednesday.
I guess it just depends how much you have in how big the warehouse is and how full it is. But yeah, I think that because right now is a great time to be a buyer if you're not super concerned about having the current year product. We do those online deals, and there's so many 40% off apparel or 70% off things, and you click on it, you can see they still have the full size run. So there's definitely a good amount of, especially like soft goods and little inventory that they just
Suspension
stocked up on.
products, lots of
Yeah,
suspension
all the
products.
bits to
I
make
feel
a
like
bike.
complete bikes too, though. Like I'm still
Yeah.
seeing tons of 40 off complete bikes. Like it's
Yep.
so if you're listening, it might be like the time to go buy one of those if you're like on the fence.
Yeah.
Honestly.
But
If you want a fresh bike,
hit refresh on the Wall Street Journal homepage first, because as soon as Trump changes his mind and pulls all the tariffs off, all those prices are going to go back up.
Oh, I thought you were literally breaking
down.
news right now. I just went.
Yeah,
I was
go
like,
down.
"Oh God, is this whole podcast
Oh, let me hit
irrelevant?"
refresh. No, you told me not to
Yeah.
hit the keyboard. I'm not touching the keyboard.
No.
Yeah.
Nothing happened in the few minutes we've been recording this, but all right, welcome back. It's time for another bit of tariff talk. We've got a new special guest taking the place of Steve. We have Tom Place from Outbound Lighting. He's joining us from, sounds like an alleyway in Santa Cruz. He's going to hopefully shed some light, and he's got a lot of manufacturing knowledge and knows how to get things from far away from one country to another, and pick his brain and see what he thinks about all these tariffs and how it's going to affect companies of his size companies and other ones as well.
Maybe Tom, could you give a bit of background on Outbound Lighting and how, like, where you have things made and how and for what market?
Sure. Yeah. So we are a lighting company. We make lights for bikes. We are a company of 8 employees right now, primarily based in Chicago, but we've got a few of us working remotely out in Washington, actually a few minutes down the street from Kaz here. And we assemble everything in-house in Chicago. We have right now one guy who assembles everything, and we have one engineer whose entire job is to make automated assembly equipment for him to make it faster and more efficient and more accurate so that we can scale without adding a bunch of heads to the staff. So that's a unique way of going about it, and has helped us quite a bit. We source parts from all over, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a lot of detail. But being an consumer electronics product means we have batteries and we have electronics, and basically none of that is actually manufactured in the U.S. with a U.S. domestic option. Lithium-ion batteries, the only manufacturer for those right now in the U.S., and they're not even making all of them here, is Tesla, and they're not selling to us. and they're not making the same size cells that we use. So all of that has to be bought overseas. So we're getting dinged on that. And then even for the electronics, you can get some passives that are fabricated here, but all of the individual integrated controllers, like that are made by Texas Instruments, for example, it's a US based company. All of their fab is in Taiwan. So there is no generic product drop in for those components, and there's no domestic option. So we're just having to suck up the cost for that. And then, for our specific company, because we're assembling everything here, all of our electronics are assembled in Arizona and then shipped to us. We've got hard parts coming from Michigan, injection molded, coming to us. So we avoid some of that, but 80% of the cost of goods for a consumer electronics product are the guts, the electronics. And that's the stuff that there is no domestic source for and is all overseas. So while a lot of people say we're made in America, which I try not to argue with, because it is generally true to the intent of it, but we are as made in America as we could physically be, without starting up a lithium ion battery plant of our own, for example.
Mm-hmm. That's a fairly level playing field. Like, your competitors are all in the same boat.
It's interesting. There's, and I don't need to get into specifics with, other. I don't need to be attacking other competitors or anything, because we're all kind of in the same boat in that all the electronics are coming from China. But for example,
in that there's a bunch of tariffs on that boat.
Yes,
yeah, it's an expensive boat.
But where they're manufactured or assembled matters. So Exposure and Lupine are European brands, or UK for Exposure. They're not charging the same tariffs to China that the US is. So they're not getting these same tariffs on their electronics. And then our tariffs on them are smaller than they are in China. So they're effectively, this is actually putting European lighting companies in a better, more competitive spot against us, an American lighting company, because of the way their supply chain is constructed.
So what you're saying is that they need to put more tariffs on. That's what you're saying, right?
That is absolutely not what I'm saying, just for the record. But then some companies, there's some completely Chinese-based companies. There's a lot of Temu garbage out there. Magic Shine is entirely based in China, but because they're shipping direct, they're getting in under the de minimis loophole. So anything under $800, they're not getting charged any tariffs on, which means Chinese products coming to the US are cheaper. But they just announced that they're getting rid of that. So if that actually happens, then that'll level the playing field quite a bit for a lot of the cheaper crap coming in, and just other options. But it's a kind of a shell game with a lot of different companies because of the final assembly state where it's done, be it Canada or European Union or China or wherever.
Do you you folks have an advantage to some of the brands by being a largely direct to consumer brand?
Yes.
I'm thinking of like somebody like Lesign. This is going to be a challenge for Lesign because they're a traditional dealer wholesale brand. They sell direct to consumer as well, I believe, in some markets in some ways, but the bulk of their business, they're Taiwan based. The bulk of their business is going to be a lot of cost change there.
Yes. And, even honestly, even for some of the American companies, like I can talk about Light in Motion just because they are currently, unfortunately, out of business before this happened. This happened back in 2018 when the first round of Trump tariffs went into place, and Light in Motion had to offshore a lot of stuff to the Philippines because they couldn't afford, as a result of the tariffs. There's an article in Bicycle Retailer about it. It went through it in detail, actually, and I just read it yesterday to refresh my memory. It was kind of wild. So that means full, complete assembly, turnkey, in the box, in the packaging, ready to ship overseas. I don't know if Knight Rider is doing that entirely, but a lot of it is, and therefore the entire product is getting dinged, and you don't have a whole lot of room to move there. But then if you then add on top of that direct to consumer model, a lot of the bigger brands, Lezein's a larger component brand. So they're in a lot of shops because they make pumps and plugs and tools and everything else too. That's distributor margin and shop margin on top of that. We've got not only a pretty healthy direct to consumer brand because we're still small. That's how we started, to have enough money to put back into the company to reinvest and grow. But we're also going direct with shops, business to business. So we aren't paying for QBP or BTI right now for additional margin to get into more shops, because that was kind of something we did strategically early on, because we wanted to grow slowly and sustainably. We didn't want to have our lights in every shop in the country, whether they needed it or not, because we wanted to scale effectively for us and not, outkick our coverage, so to speak. And so now that puts us in a position where, okay, we don't have another 35% margin hit going to the distributor, which if we did, this would wipe out all of our profit, like entirely. We would have to immediately raise prices, or we'd be losing money on everything, working through shops at least. So having healthy direct consumer helps.
So for brands that are like, take, lights out of it, but let's say it's, pedals or something else. If you are a brand that brings them in from overseas, from China or one of the now added tariff areas, you feel like they will have no choice but to raise prices right away.
I think so. And I think you'll even see that to some extent on, machined parts here in the US, where the raw material is being tariffed to encourage more domestic production of steel and aluminum. It's not going to be as significant because it's on the raw material. So just the cost of goods, not the finished product. But, I've got a buddy that runs Cognitive MTB, is a clothing brand. And the clothing industry in particular is there isn't a clothing industry in the US. It's like 2% of all clothes in the US are manufactured here. So for a small brand trying to source equipment to fabricate clothing, completely screwed. There is no option for that. And that also brings up another topic of, the tariffs are not just on specific products, consumer products to reduce consumerism. They're on everything. So that means all of the pneumatics that we get for our robots are coming from Germany. All of our robotic stuff is coming from either Japan or Korea. That's all tariffed. We even use flex pipe stands for a lot of our racks and like workstations that we're building for the automated stuff. That's all coming from
line
Canada.
Lock stuff. I love
kind
that
of
stuff.
It's a slightly different implementation, but it's really easy to build flexible workstations out of that, and that's all coming from Canada, which is now also getting tariffed. So if you wanted to invest in US manufacturing right now, there's not a lot of options for things to invest in that are from the US. They're all still overseas. So you're kind of gambling with all of this. If you're, because of the uncertainty of all this, whether the tariffs stay in place, they get worse, or they get removed in a month after negotiation. If you want to invest in building up American manufacturing, you have to invest in equipment. And almost all of that is going to also be subject to tariffs.
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Stefan.
I was just going to say, so we need to make the t-shirt making machines, and like we should start a company that makes the manufacturing stuff.
Yeah, if we make a sock mill, like sock darning device, because really, I read a book of, I don't know, a couple months ago about that, how they're, especially with the production of clothing in America, like all the mills are shut down, especially in the South. There used to be tons of them, and then obviously with fast fashion, they all shipped overseas. But it's so hard. If you wanted to start like a sock company, there's only a few, or if you wanted to make like things, you would think that there are, infrastructure in place. There's not, and you can't just go over to like an abandoned mill and turn it back on and be like, here we go, it's working. Like,
that's a really interesting thing I hadn't thought about, Tom, is how you can't even switch that easily. You're still screwed either way, I guess.
Well, so if you like Stefan, if we're going to start our high pivot hardtail company today, and we need a bunch of forging equipment and whatnot. Like, yes, you can amortize spread out the cost of the equipment as an operational, as an expense over time.
Mm-hmm.
But but it is gonna, like, if I'm doing that right now, I'm gonna wait a few months rather than pay 105% tariff on the equipment I need from China right now.
Right. And
Like,
that's
was it Tom you were saying? Is it, I forget what the
yeah,
actual total is. It
yeah,
105% right now
so right now it's 54% for China
on
to
top
the US.
of.
Yeah, but the plan is, the published plan from the White House is that they want to push more. They want to add more to it. So it's going to get over 100%. That is their
Okay.
published plan. I don't know if that's
Right.
going to happen, but it was published, so we can talk about it here. It's I think this comes back to like the two main ways that this will affect the industry. It's the direct impact, which we can do the math and figure out the cost of goods, the cost to assembly, labor, and figure out how much your margins are getting hit. So how much you'd have to increase cost to stay above water. And then there's the uncertainty of it. The uncertainty is going to kill a ton of companies because no matter which way you choose, you're gambling. You're either gambling that it's just a negotiating tool and the tariffs are going to come off in a month or 2 months or 6 months, or you're gambling that they're going to stay on 4 years from now. And if you pick the wrong one, you're either way behind the 8 ball, or you're, if you want to invest in tooling right now, when the tooling is also tariffed, you could invest a ton and then the tariffs are gone 6 months from now. You've dumped all this capital into something that ends up costing you more. You're putting yourself in the worst possible position. So
yeah, and the tariffs are gone, so you don't have the built-in advantage over the foreign manufacturing again.
correct. If this is just a negotiating tool, then it's basically holding U.S. companies hostage and using them as like, hey, I'll shoot. If you don't negotiate with me, I'm going to shoot my U.S. companies. Like it feels really weird to be in this position where we're having to guess based on these other, long-term plans that aren't made clear because it's a negotiation. It's a power play.
So, Tom, I mean, your company seems like one of the few companies that might be actually set up to benefit from this in some way versus most of your competitors and most of the people across the industry. Like, you can absorb the cost hit, either absorb or have a minimal impact on your
benefit
prices.
Is a strong word. I wouldn't use the word benefit specifically, but you're correct in that because of the way we've kind of built our brand from the start, where we weren't, there's kind of two ways to grow. It's either grow the brand as quickly as possible, as many sales as possible, so you can sell off to a big company and go buy a yacht and retire, or you build a brand so that 10 years from now, you're here, you're stable, you don't have to lay people off. And we like what we're doing, so we want to keep doing this 10, 20 years from now. So we've grown slowly, intentionally. We haven't, reached for the big, enticing poison apple on the tree and dumped into Amazon and just tried to push. So because of that, and because of our setup for, the shop network versus direct to consumer, and just kind of the stage we're in, we've been around for 7 years, long enough to know we're not going to go bankrupt, but still young. Like, we're still growing quite a bit. We still have not even a full product portfolio to cover all of the use cases and applications we want. That means we're pushing direct to consumer and B2B because we can maintain that, wholesale margin that we would have given a distributor to reinvest in more tooling, in new products to get more out. And you kind of have to do that. We're not at a state where we can just chill. So right now, the tariffs, they don't entirely wipe out all of our profit for the year if we just, project it out the way things currently are. But it's a lot. Like, it's a big hit. And, we give health insurance to our employees. Health insurance looks real expensive right now because of the fraction of, it's a much larger makeup of the leftover money we have to reinvest in the company. We can still do that. And right now we're definitely not going to panic. We're in a position where we can at least be stable and wait and see what happens, absorb some of the cost, and then react, I would say, hopefully intelligently over time. Because we've built up our assembly in-house and we've already got a bunch of the equipment we need. We're kind of ahead a little bit on that. But again, our labor costs are low here. It's just this increasing parts cost where we don't have an option. We don't have a lever to pull there. So the only lever is increasing costs. And we won't have to do it as much as, say, a clothing brand where it's 100% of their cost of goods is all getting completely screwed. But we will still have to do it a significant amount because the electronics are the parts that are the most expensive. They're all getting tariffed.
It is part of the strategy then for you to like almost do less volume as well and kind of just try to like hunker down, see what happens in the next couple months, and then ramp back up after that? Or is it like
timing's pretty good for light companies?
Yeah, so we are quite fortuitous in that this is the dead season for us. We sell a lot more lights because we're US based and we are heavy in the US market. We don't do advertising in Europe or overseas because it's really hard to do business overseas, and there's a bunch of tariffs getting into, say, the UK right now. They're 25% VAT. One of the only examples where there's actually like tariffs causing a problem. But at least for going the other direction, I mean. So we don't want to go slow. We just are slow right now. And because we are trying not to, have a seasonal staff of 10 employees just building lights in the middle of peak season when we need it, we're building inventory right now for October, November, December. So we don't, and a lot of that is paid for parts. So we've gotten ahead a little bit. We're still going to be building continuously through, from the start of these tariffs all the way up through our peak season. And we don't necessarily want to sell less because we need a certain amount of money to keep the lights on and to keep going. What we would end up doing is we'd pause, new tooling for new products where we don't know if the demand's going to be there. Another part of the uncertainty is what's going to happen to demand. If prices all have to go up across the board and everybody's making less and, all the other ancillary impacts to the economy, what does that do for consumers wanting more products? If our sales just naturally go down also, we don't necessarily want to lean into that and sell even less and then put ourselves in a really bad position. So we're definitely not in wait and see isn't the right way to talk about it because we're constantly monitoring things. We're not just sitting back and letting things happen, but we are not going to overreact because we're in a kind of strong position right now. And what's crazy to me is that like a strong position for us is still pretty dicey. Like this wipes out all of our profit for the year, kind of dicey, I'm really concerned that a lot of small brands that have, really tight margins or are really reliant on the wholesale model, their margins are gone. If you have a reasonably priced product and then you've got a 35% shop margin, or in, margins for clothing typically are 50% or higher. And then you've got a 30 to 40% wholesale distributor margin. And then you've got your landed cost. Your margin, like operating margin at the end of the day, might be 10% or less. That's gone and you're in the negative. And you mentioned timing. The timing, there is no timing. Like there's no heads up. What do you do? Like there's, companies we actually are currently making storage bags. We didn't think it would be a popular product or things that people would really need. So we got an overseas company to make some, and they're on the water right now, which means by the time they get here, they're going to get tariffed. And that's happening to a ton of companies all over the world where orders are on the water, already paid for, but once they get here, they're going to be tariffed. And that was not part of the plan. So those orders for a lot of these companies that are small, they're going to sell those and they're going to be losing money. And there's no alternative other than going back to the customer and saying, hey, can you pay me 50% more, please? Which does not go over very well.
We're certainly going to learn a lot about price elasticity the next bit.
Yeah.
Kaz, did you have some questions for us to rattle through from the peanut gallery, or
we didn't know? We kind of addressed that with the last with Steve. We were talking about like whether it would shift companies. We had a question that was asking if bike companies would start focusing on other markets other than the US because of this. I don't know if that would apply as much to Outbound, but because of where you're based, but like other companies might be going to South America or finding new outlets to sell their product that don't get hit with such a high tariff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that'll be very market and product dependent. For us and where the company's based, like Exposure and Lupine being good examples in the EU and the UK. they already dominate the EU and the UK because it's their backyard. Like Pivot sells bikes in Phoenix, Transition sells in Bellingham, they sell in Europe. I think the interesting ones will be any like startups in Canada or, like I don't know, like there's retaliatory tariffs from some companies on the U.S. right now. Some are bowing and saying, "Oh, we'll zero out tariffs," and they're still going to get tariffed more by the U.S. because the plan is nonsense. But I don't expect it to be easier to go approach other parts of the world. And with that, especially for a small brand, customer support is a big part of what we do as a company. It is equally important as the product for us, for getting a customer that's happy and wants to support the brand and comes back as a repeat customer. And doing that in non-English speaking countries means you need to have support for that. Doing that overseas means you have to have either staff and facilities over there, or you have to deal with international overseas shipping, which on warranties, a lot of like say warranty, if you like, for example, if we have a repair in Germany, we have to show the German government paperwork that we are not just sending a new product to replace, but we are retrieving the old one, so that we're not just adding more products to the industry. And so we have to do paperwork to prove to get back the tariff we got charged on the thing. It's an enormous amount of tedium. And for any small brand, that's crushing. Like the amount of labor that's involved to go overseas is really difficult. And the risk is really high. Risk of exposure to your brand and your reputation as well. So I think we'll see it, but I don't know from who or where.
We did get a few more questions in while we were doing this. I guess one of the commenters was asking if we think the tariffs are going to have more of an impact on bike companies, bike distributors, or bike shops. Like who's going to? That's a
yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it. Yeah, I mean, they all get hit.
Well, and this is the thing, tariffs are supposed to be pointed. They're supposed to be targeting specific industries to incentivize that industry to bring more like steel manufacturing to the US or what have you. These are blanket tariffs. There's no during COVID, there was carve outs for bicycles as, or bicycle lights actually as safety equipment. So that actually hurt us because we got tariffed on the electronics, just the bare electronics assembling in the US. But if we assembled overseas a complete bike light, the bike light itself would not have been tariffed because it's safety equipment. So there's a bunch of weird bullshit like that just like, how do you get around that? Right. And I think now you've got the raw materials, the components, the completed products, e-bikes, like every battery pack is sourced overseas, even if they're assembled in the US. It's going to affect the base product, which means everyone downstream is affected by that. So the wholesaler and the shop are both affected. And if the prices are that high, I think it'll affect the manufacturer because it'll encourage them to go to a direct-to-consumer model more so they can keep that margin in-house. Or they'll have to raise prices, which will hurt sales. But if they go to direct-to-consumer, that hurts wholesale and shops down the line. If they raise the prices, that also hurts shops down the line. I think one of the weird aspects is it might help in the very immediate short term with companies that have overstock that they're trying to get rid of.
We were just talking about this with Steve, with Frothingham.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. That'll be a nice little shot in the arm for a few brands that are in a like tight position, but that's very temporary. That's getting rid of aged inventory and then on to the next thing, which has to be sustainable. So
I agree with your take that that a lot of these brands are certainly going to consider cutting out a middleman. If Uncle Sam is inserting themselves as a middleman, you're going to look for an opportunity to take a middleman out.
Yep.
What else you got, Kaz?
So you're saying, Brian, that would be dealer and distributor, like,
or at least dealer direct. Maybe not cutting out the dealer, but maybe cutting out the distributor.
Interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes into logistics of the specific brand and the type of product they have and whether or not the distributor adds enough value to be worth the margin hit. And also the scale. Some companies have to operate on that scale because they don't have the logistics in-house to manage dealer direct for the entire, 10,000 shops they support. Or if they go out of the QBP catalog, maybe shops just don't know that they still exist, and they don't know to go direct now. Like there's a lot of work that has to go into place to make sure that you don't kill your market by making a rash change like that to save a bunch of margin. Like it's still a lot of work up front.
I think Steve Frothingham would require me by law to state that those brands doing that should reach out to Bicycle Retailer to advertise and then tell the shops that they still exist, even if they're not in the distributor handbook.
That's
I think by law,
point.
Frothingham would say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
what else you got, Kez?
That's kind of it. I think we hit most of them between speaking with Steve and speaking with you, Tom. It's been got some good answers, lots of good questions. I mean, there's plenty of questions of what's all going to happen after this, but I think that we'll probably have to revisit. I mean, realistically, even next week we might have different answers, but maybe next month or something we do another. Next month
regular,
our tariff talk.
We're doing tariff talk moratorium on tariff talk for like at least a couple of weeks, please.
But then something crazy is going to happen, and we're going to have to.
Well, we could maybe make like a small recurring segment. Like tariff talk with Tom.
Yeah, exactly. You can send us your soundbite for the week, and
I'll gladly do a check-in. Just give me a few weeks after Sea Otter, because I expect this conversation to be nonstop for the next 6 days.
Oh yeah, I think we're all going to need a little.
This is a good primer for my walking around Sea Otter, asking everyone.
Yes. We're gonna have this same conversation over and over and over and over.
I'm gonna be a tariff expert by the time we're done. It's gonna be.
Well, I am so sorry to all of you that listened through. This is probably the driest Pinkbike podcast that we've maybe ever had.
And we could have brought out charts with numbers. Like we could have made this so much worse.
I mean, we can still do stuff in post. I can add some start charts and things in here. So there's time. I can figure out some sales spreadsheets and I think we'll wrap on that, at least for this segment about tariffs. But thanks for joining, Tom.
Absolutely.
We'll see you, Otter.
Thanks, Tom. That was really interesting.
Yeah. We'll try to ask questions other than tariff talk when we're down there. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Thanks. All right. We need to finish this up with a little show and tell session because we just had an hour of maybe too dry tariff talk. So I think we'll start with Stefan because he's got look at that. There's an animal.
Half my goal of, we're at Pinkbike basically just to put Doug on the homepage as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So everyone, this is Doug. He's a 3-year-old golden retriever, field golden. He just listened to that whole tariff talk. So that's my show and tell. I don't know what else to tell you guys. But
that's how old's Doug?
He's 3.5.
Oh, nice. I don't really like dogs, but Doug looks nice. He doesn't look like a mean dog.
Yeah, look at him. He's perfect.
No, he looks pretty good.
Sorry for non-bike related too. Everyone.
This is important.
Yeah.
Doug's bike related.
Yeah, I'm trying to find a cat for show and tell. My rental cat went away. I think it got eaten by an animal, so I need a new one. Yeah. So if anyone has a Siamese cat kitten that they would like to give me, please let me know. I need a Siamese cat kitten, please. Yeah.
I thought you were more of a turtle guy.
Well, yeah, we have a turtle. We don't need more though. They last for like 100 years. This one's almost 30. So just need a cat now. But yeah.
I like that your partner has had the turtle longer than she's known you.
Oh yeah, she's had it since middle school. So it's like
that's wild.
Almost 30 years now. Yeah.
I don't have an animal, Stefan. I just have a child.
Yeah. They're kind of similar, right?
Similar.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I would say that your dog is probably at a similar, understanding of the world is probably very similar to my 5-year-old right now.
Dude, he has the best life ever. I'm so jealous. He just does not chills, eats, goes for bike rides, goes to the beach. It's like, wish I could be a dog. But do you have anything to show and tell, Brian?
Okay, so for all brands, the best possible marketing thing you can do is to give me something that's cut in half. I love cut in half things. This is a good ASMR one this time.
Which is that i9 hub?
This is the i9, the Tiger 2s. I was at the office a few days ago and was like, ooh, cut in half hub. I'm taking that. No functional. It's good.
I like hubs that are dead silent.
Do you feel? Okay, yeah, Kaz, you're a silent hub guy. Yeah. Stefan, are you a silent hub guy?
I don't want my bike to be very loud at all. I would prefer it to make no noise.
Yep.
I don't want I don't want the
mushy
delayed. Yeah. So just a quiet hub with normal engagement, but It's not like Chris King or i9 or anything.
This
What's
is
that?
the Qvist hub, or Qvist, I'm not sure how to say it. They're a German company made in Germany by this guy named Roman, who's really smart. It's basically like a double star ratchet.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like a floating star ratchet in the side.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can, the idea is that you can have twice as many engagement points with the same amount. Like the problem with star ratchet is if you have, you can increase the engagement points, but then it gets shallower, so it gets
Yeah.
less strong.
Yep.
So this, you can have the same.
You're killing me by not twisting that thing.
I know, right? Are you?
Just come on.
Just do it. Just do it. Okay, here you go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Glockenspiel or something.
Which one do you prefer, that or the Hydra?
I don't like that one. The one you had first, second. No, I don't like
I
these
would probably
noises.
make them quieter. Anyways.
Yeah. This is this is how we make sure
Mike-
everyone is gone. This is like we got most listeners out with the tariff talk, and now we're removing them with some hub
People
ratcheting.
weirdly.
You're still here.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yeah.
for hanging out.
Yeah.
Kaz, what's yours? What's yours?
My show. I mean, I could talk about the specialized Levo, but you can go and read about that. It's on the internet now. But the Levo
This is
4.
such a cop out.
No, it's not really a cop out. I mean, I can't really hold it in my hand right now.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. But yeah, there's this week for everyone that is tuning in, it's obviously Sea Otter. So there's 10,000 bike and product launches. So check that out on the homepage. And we'll also probably do a podcast from Sea Otter. So you'll get some more of those Sea Otter updates. But this week does seem like kind of e-bike launch time, but there are some non-motorized bikes, luckily, too, that we'll be talking about.
DJI is hot.
Yeah,
It's
April
not just the
10th.
Amplo.
April 10th is a big DJI. I guess Uno has their new bike that day, too, and Forbidden.
Which is today, which is the day that, like,
Yeah,
it's
you'll
2
be listening
days
to
in the
this on April
future, but it's the day that we're releasing
Yep.
this. Yeah.
And a new non-motorized bike from Intense. So yeah, lots of cool stuff. And then
Excellent.
yeah, but next time we do this, well, maybe not the Seattle one, but the one after, we'll get back to some reader questions. We do have those. The capability is still there, so we'll get that there. And there are some good ones I wanted to do, but we'll get them next time. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.